thank you. Thank you to the presenters for accepting the invitation to this roundtable. We are supposed to finish, I think, sharp at 1:30. In the meantime, I think the first section is a little bit of an appetizer, it's a little bit shorter, and it's focused on the what to teach, and the second one in how. My mission is just helping you around and sharing the session, and of course we will have some time for debate for both sections. So we are not just debating at the end. I think it would be much more interesting if we have the chance. We have a shorter time for debate than the first section, I think about 10 minutes. And hopefully we will have 20 minutes at least at the end. So thank you very much, and thank you. I know that first we have foreseen 4 sections. We have streamlined into 2, the what and the how. So let us start with the what. You have more or less 10 minutes. I don't know who wants to begin.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, Mr. Koumi.
So there was a question there as are there topics that cannot be addressed with video? And there are lots of things that print can do better than video. So, for example, when the student needs self-paced, concentrated study of fine detail, equations, diagrams, closely reasoned arguments. Now, you don't want a time-based medium for this activity. You want them to look at something, or at least if it's a video, they would have to freeze it in order to do it. Okay, but the point of a video is movement. So this is the one of the affordances, as we say, of print is surveyability, because you can survey it and look at your own pace. So that's one thing. And then another one is navigability. It's difficult to find things on a video, whereas in printed materials there's an easier way to find things. Now, nowadays there might be some ways of annotating videos so that you can find things. So that's something new that's coming up, or it's been around for some time. But navigating through print is easier than through video. So there might be, because you've got random access, I can turn several pages and look at that. If I'm revising, I know it was on the right-hand side of a page somewhere at the top. So that's something that's very difficult to find on a video. So that's another thing. And then there's the question of legibility. There are some things which really a screen just cannot show. Very large charts, say DNA sequences. I've seen a very big chart which is the energy cycle of phosphorus in the body. It's an enormous thing with so many things on it. You wouldn't be able to put it on one screen. So that's a question of where it's information in quantity. When there's information in very big quantity, and it's a question of legibility. So that's my thinking on those.
Okay, hello. The first question was what can be addressed by video? Well, nothing, obviously. Everything can be addressed by video, clearly. My background is I work for UCL, which is a big university, a big research university in the UK, and I've been also working in as say a number of video projects. So I've been working in educational video for quite a while. What we've seen is a real growth, really across the university, in interest in using video in education. It's not confined to particular disciplines or particular subjects. One of the reasons for that is a strange one. We've been recording lectures for about 5 or 6 years at UCL. So unlike you people, we do a lot of traditional lectures, and we record them. Now, initially, there was a fear that pedagogically that was not very good use of video. It was boring and so on. And what we found is that that is not actually the case. One is that students use the video material in quite surprising ways. They're very, we record a lecture and the students then go through it, and they don't do it linearly. They don't start from the beginning to the end. They will go and search for things they find interesting or things they found difficult. Okay? So they have a kind of a dialogue with the material already. Now, that's from the student's point of view. The next point of view is from the academic, the teacher's point of view, is that it's shown for a wide range of our teachers that video can be useful in their subject. They have seen themselves on the camera, which is the first stage, and is often the most traumatic stage in video production, is seeing yourself for the first time on the camera. Once you get over that, then people think, well, what else can I do with it? And what's quite interesting is that people are coming to ideas from right across our subject areas. In our university, I think general university, we teach everything from medicine to fine art, engineering, everything, law, all sorts of things like that. And people are coming through these ideas. So I'm beginning to think that there isn't any particular areas that video, in terms of a discipline, that video doesn't contribute to. Okay? That's one thing. So there's nothing really particularly strong or weak. The way that we approach video at the moment is we try to integrate it into the design, the learning design of a program or a module. Okay? And what we do is, when we're designing modules, this is one model we used, is we get people to think of not 5, but 6 different learning types as they're designing a new module. Yeah? 5 things that students can do as they're learning. One is acquisition of knowledge. It's a sort of normal thing you would do in a course, learn about stuff. Secondly is investigation, is that students find their own knowledge or discover their own knowledge through investigation, research type activities. One is collaboration, is working with colleagues, and that's another way of acquiring knowledge. One is practice, is actually doing stuff in the discipline area. So that could be lab stuff, or it could be, you know, if you're a lawyer, it's a kind of performance. If it's a mathematician, you're solving problems. Discussion, slightly different from collaboration. Discussion is the idea that we can, by discussion, we can clarify and develop our ideas around subject. And the other one is production, is the students produce things. So there's 6 things. What do you say? Acquisition, investigation, collaboration, practice, discussion, and production. 6 things. Now, where does video fit into any of those things, right? And in some it fits better than others. Okay? So acquisition, learning about things. Instructional video, my goodness, we've seen plenty of that. So it works quite well. Investigation, maybe. Video can work in there as well. And we've seen some nice stuff where we give people case studies, videos and case studies, and get them to investigate it, to think about that. So you get a case study of a problem at work, for example, from different perspectives. Students then investigate that, discuss it. Collaboration with video, yeah, difficult, a bit more difficult, challenging to do that. So we'll jump over that one. Practice, difficult as well, because if part of your discipline learning is to learn how to do something physically in a lab or something like that, then it's actually video might not be the primary way of learning. Doing it is the primary way of learning. But video can provide a way of showing people how to do it. And I think that's quite important. For example, I'll give you an example. Labs. We do a lot of labs in our thing. Laboratory work. Students are in a laboratory, quite laboratory, with glassware and stuff like that. They've got to learn how to behave in a lab, how to do things, how to run experiments, how to be safe. Okay? The only way they can learn to do that is by doing it, frankly. But we use video to get them to show them the right way to do it, to show them, model good practice before they go in. So video has a part to play to prepare students for that. Discussion is another part. We do lots of discussion stuff in our university, a lot of debate and discussion. And again, video can be used as a stimulus. We talked about with some colleagues, video is powerful for that. And the final one is production. And there's a real interest in our university of students as producers. Okay, we've got to the point where our academics can be producers. We can produce video. We have the software. We have the technology. And now we're really interested in our students doing that. And that's quite new for us. It's quite complicated because we have to support them, and we also have to find a way to assess them. If the students produce a video, how do we assess that? I know how to mark an essay. I know how to do that. How do I mark a video? And that's a bit more challenging for us. I'll stop at that point. That's
Okay. So we have begun with topics. We have been moving to some practices. And we have still some time yet. One of the questions were about features. It is connected to the how, but it is here to talk about this kind of what kind of images to use, because sometimes we understand educational video as a synonym of recording a lecture or. Yep. Or a voiceover on a description, a conceptual description on some phenomena. But there is also the question of how using effectively the media, the visual language, in terms of how to use camera in order to communicate in different areas of knowledge. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Well, this will come up in my workshop tomorrow, but I wanted to show you things which I don't think you can read easily, but I will go through. So these are two areas in which I think video can be powerful in doing. And one is on cognition side, and the other one is showing experiences, showing people going out in the world and providing experiences. So probably you can't read this, but there are 9 items in this first one. There's composite images. You can have split screens and superimpositions. I could talk for half an hour about how to use that kind of thing. Animated diagrams, so animation is another thing. Using visual metaphor or analogy. Number 4, illustrating concepts with real examples. Modeling a process by simplifying it. Putting different experiences, different things next to each other so as to reduce the time necessary for learning. So something which would take in real life a whole day, you could show on video in 2 minutes, and therefore you come within the concentration span of the learner instead of it taking a long time. There's lots of condensing time. At the bottom it says narrative power, but then on this side providing experiences. Now first of all, there's the main thing is movement. You don't need video unless there's movement required. If it's a set of static diagrams, then you can use print. So that's the main reason for using video, is you need movement. And to get the realism of movement, you have to have the sound recorded synchronously. So when people walk, you hear them walking, and so on. So these are experiences which can be realistic. You want them to be realistic. You can have viewpoints which are impossible in real life. For example, aerial viewpoints, undersea viewpoints, where the camera is so close that you could not focus. You could have, or even closer with microscopy. Places, dangerous places you could take the camera, which you shouldn't take students to. 3 dimensions, showing 3 dimensions with good lighting and movement. Showing people animals interacting. Slow motion, fast motion, it's all in there. Showing the pacing and body movements of people interacting with each other, facial expressions and so on. There could be also resource material for students to have a look at and stop the video and answer questions and look at, say, the temperature of something. So it can be resource material, simulations, in other words, on video for them to do a kind of experiment themselves. And then finally it's on this side, staged events, where if you have complex experiments, you then show it on video instead of, well, you don't have face-to-face anyway, but in a normal university, if you have a complex experiment, you show it on video, you only have to do it once. You don't have to do it again and again and again. Staged events can be dramatized enactment, role-playing of something, like techniques of discussion, techniques of working together to solve problems. So there's the cognitive side with various techniques, and there's also the experiential side. So all of those things, there's 9 and 9, there's 18 different things you can do with video better than you can do with print, and most of the time better than face-to-face as well. Okay.
Wow. So 18 different things you can do with video. The question then is, kind of my role in my university is try to get our academic colleagues is to think about which of all these things do they choose. What do they do? So I say to them, go back and work out what is your pedagogical purpose for using video. What are you wanting the students to learn, basically? And really think about that hard. And I work with course teams, with module teams, and often it's quite interesting is when they start thinking about what do we really want the student to learn here. That debate becomes quite interesting. Sometimes not as clear as it appears. And I think if you have that kind of discussion, you can be clear as where you think video, not only where video fits into your learning design, but what kind of video might fit in there, what you're going to choose. Because if you have a video, for example, of you want to show a lab technique, a technique inside the laboratory, you have to film that very carefully. It has to be well lit. You have to be very careful about your storyboard, so it's clear from the students what the process, what they have to do to each stage. That is a type of filming which is quite difficult and expensive. On the other hand, you might want to take a case study, and that might be it's just speaking with an individual, a kind of talking head, and that individual will introduce a new concept. It could be an academic, or it could be somebody in work. That could just be done on your mobile phone. That will do. You've worked out what you know what the pedagogical requirement is. That is enough. That's all you need. And the point about that is authenticity. What you want to get the authentic voice of the speaker, and that is enough. So sound in that obviously has to be clear and so on. But you don't need to have very complicated video setup. So you've got one side is you've got the sort of very complicated thing, and the other you've got something very simple, authentic. But that's, you know which you're going to choose because you know what the pedagogical requirement is. You've thought about that sort of thing. So that helps in starting to find your way through these different choices that Jack's given you there. The other thing will come up, I'll talk about it now anyway, because it'll come up later in the discussion, is about motivation. Is why do the students look at this video? What are they going to do with this video? And I think this motivation can be internal to the video itself. The video can be so beautiful, so well storyboarded, such a strong narrative, such strong speakers, that the students will sit and work through that. But the motivation might be external. It might be a boring video you've got from the internet, but it shows something really interesting. And we were talking about physics earlier on. It shows some sort of phenomenon online, and you think that's a bit of a boring video. How I'm going to motivate the students is to give them the right kind of critical questions to look at that video. Not just to watch it, but to look at it, to see what's actually going on there. So motivation might come from outside there. And I'll probably talk later about integration with, in fact, there's a question later on about integration. So basically, lots of choice in video there. There's a lot of things we can do with it, but think about the pedagogical outcomes that you want before you start. I'll stop there.
Okay. Right. So we have just run out of time, but I would like, before questions, we can go back later on. There is a final question in this section about the perspectives, looking for the perspective of an online university.
Yeah.
I was taking some notes and thinking about that YouTube is 10 right now, and for us it's very difficult to separate video for online environments and the interaction between the web and video. And I would like to give, if you could give us a very quick thought, and we could go back then and have some time for questions now, about the perspective of the teacher from the perspective of an online environment, an online university as the UOC, and the online student too. What to expect when your work and your learning process is already online. If you can give us some first thoughts about that.
Okay, well, I mean, you're online. The Open University now does most of the teaching online as far as resources are concerned. And of course there are also tutors. You're a tutor, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah. Like you have accompaniment in yours. But if you're online, then students are very used to watching videos and looking for themselves to find videos online. So I don't see that there's any problem about introducing videos as a resource for your students. What I would say, though, is that I like the idea of video segmented in, and after each video there are questions given to the student to answer, and then suggested answers as well. And this could be on-screen text. So they're asked questions, on-screen text, and then if they want to find the answers, they look at the answers. So I've got an example here. This is Fleming when he discovered penicillin, and this was a video I made once, and they showed a news item of Fleming reenacting his discovery. And then they asked, after the students have seen this, they asked the students a question that Fleming claimed he had done such and such, but now you know how penicillin works. What do you think he got wrong? It's quite a complicated question. So what he got wrong is he thought penicillin killed bacteria, but actually it stops bacteria from multiplying. It doesn't kill bacteria that are already there. Fleming thought that. So he got it wrong, but I'm glad he found it anyway. So really deep questions to ask the students and then suggested answers. That can be done with video, so it's video plus print.
Okay. So we've been currently we're doing a kind of a survey of academics and colleagues, teachers. We're asking them how they use video and what are the advantages and so on from them, and it's been really very, very interesting. But the answers kind of follow into a pattern which we saw when I started in looking at video in education about 15 years ago. And there's kind of four areas that people have taken interest in. One is the use of the video image itself, and I think a lot of things that Jack's been talking about, and really the idea that students expect to have a rich media environment and expect to see images for all the reasons that Jack just said. They're coming in increasingly. They are the YouTube generation, I believe, and they use YouTube more than they use Google. And I think that we have to just come to terms with that. They expect a visual representation of knowledge. So it's important for us to understand that and understand the benefits of that. As Jack said, things about even the most sort of dull videos, if you've got a dynamic person or somebody showing a lot of enthusiasm for a course, for a subject, it brings a kind of human side to it. But that's only one part of it. What's really made video grow, I believe, in my university is to do with interactivity, and a very basic type of interactivity. What I mean by that is the students can look at video after an event, or before an event, in their own time, on their own devices, in their own location. And we often forget about that, just that simple fact. It's incredibly powerful. In education, we've been teaching students in lectures and so on for about, 400, 500 years. But those events were always something that just disappeared into the ether. Now, in some cases, they're now captured, we can look at them. And the students like to do that, and they like to have that control, that agency, as they say, over those learning objects. And they look at them in quite sophisticated ways. They can look, as I said before, people never look at a video, or at least look at our videos anyway, from the beginning to end. They'll stop and start and go backwards and forwards. They sometimes do it in groups, looking at the video as a collective and deciding which bits are important. In the tools that we have, students can mark bits they find interesting, and those bookmarks can be shared with other students. So we're starting to get to the point where video becomes a focus of collaborative activity. We're starting to think about whether we can get students to do collaborative transcripts of videos, all sorts of things around that area. So does that integrate, that sort of interactivity is really interesting. But the key point I think, for us in an increasingly online university, both here, completely online, and for us, increasingly blended, is to do with integration. Video doesn't stand on its own anymore. It's not something you watch in a dark room with your colleagues. It's something that is on the screen and it's related to everything around about it. And I think that's quite challenging, I think, to design, because the video itself can be contextualized by the resources round about it. I said before, you can drive students in to look at a video critically by getting them to ask the right question. We have, I'll talk a little bit more about interactivity later on, but the point about that is that the students see video as part of as an integrated part of the learning environment. It's not something separate. And sometimes I think I think it's right that we focus on video, but it should just be, I'd like video to become just as mainstream as text, as mainstream as live events, just something that we do in that. So integration is important. And the last bit is input. That we're increasingly getting the students, and we talked about students as producers, students to input into this, their own resources, their own video resources. So there's kind of 4 eyes that we've talked about. We've got the image itself, interactivity, integration, and input. Those are the 4 things. And it just helps sometimes when we look at the complexity of video and all the hundreds of things we can do with it, it sometimes helps to look at those 4 simple aspects of it. And that helps us to think how video will support the online university.
Thank you. So it's time for a short break for questions, and then we will go to the how. But I think we have already started to talk about the how.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to differentiate one thing from the other. So this is your chance. First chance.
Well, I want to ask about the interactive part and the tool that you use for marking and sharing of those images. You can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we use Echo 360 as our tool that we use. So it's really interesting. That started off as lecture capture, and if I'm speaking with a a video, an audience who's interested in video in education, whenever I use the word lecture capture, people. But it's been quite important for us because, for one, is that it's got a lot more people interested in video than were doing it before. It's also got the students using video. It's getting the students using video constructively. It becomes part of their study. It's quite important. But it's also put money into quite a sophisticated technical environment that we can now use. So that technical environment, as I say, was originally for recording lectures. So Echo 360 is Panopto. There's a number of media sites. There's a number of these things. You've got your own system here. There's a few of them out there. But all of them, what they do is once you've got the recording in there, they allow the students with their own account to go in and bookmark it. Okay. So they can go to part of the video and they say, this is what I think is interesting or confusing. With Echo, if the students are in a group, they can share those bookmarks with the colleagues, so you can get a point on that. Now, what we think is happening is the students then go back to those bookmarks later when it comes to the exam. Okay, so they don't necessarily, it's quite interesting, they don't necessarily have notes from the video, they go back and look at the original video. So, you get this idea of double dip learning, right? Now what that means is that in looking at our data, the students will be at an event, they will then go, if they don't understand something immediately after the event, they will go online and we can see the jump afterwards. About an hour or 2 hours after the event, they go and have a look at it. They then bookmark it, they then forget about it. And then when it comes to exam, they go back and they get a second dip. It's like a camel's hump, big one, another one. And that second one is them going back in and looking at those bookmarks. So bookmarks is really important, I think. It's very important because the video is quite, the Jack said, video is quite a difficult thing to navigate, actually. And if you have a way that you can mark pieces of it, and people can put notes in as well. I mean, in theory, I'm not saying our students do this, but in theory, you could have a timeline on a video. It doesn't have to be a lecture recording. It could be any video, by the way. It's just that's how we got the technology in. Where the students can put a note on there, and that can then link to another video, or it could link to a piece of text or a discussion, or something like that, or a better explanation. So, I think when you're thinking about video, do think about the social aspect of it. If you don't have that in your current system, encourage your developers to put that in, because it does, I think, adds enough. I think the future of video is social. I've got a question for the end here. The future of video is social. And I think that would be a very good feature to have if you don't have it already.
I like that idea, the annotation that you were talking about, even individual. I mean, with printed materials, the Open University always had a big, wide margin in the printed materials to allow for students to write their own notes.
Yeah.
Now we've got the techniques to do that on the video.
Yeah.
So that would be good for revision.
We've got the idea of doing collaborative transcripts and things like that as well. So the idea that it's very difficult. We quite like to have the idea of video subtitles. That's a nice thing. It's a good thing to do. It makes it more accessible and more usable. It makes it more searchable also if you've got subtitles. But it's incredibly expensive to do. And it can't really easily be done automatically, because if you're in a subject where the vocabulary is quite specialised, it is hard for an online dictionary to find it. And therefore, and also, there's also the kind of human aspect of it. Some of our academics, including me, have quite strong accents. And again, I can't use Siri, for example. It doesn't understand me at all. I'm Scottish, by the way. But so it's very hard. We can't rely on automatic. I mean, it's getting much better. You've seen the automatic transcription on YouTube. It's quite good, but it's never going to be good enough for academic purposes. So this is something we've thought about quite recently: is to get the students to create their own transcripts of video or subtitles for that, and then it makes it clearer. And you can imagine then students doing that, they're much cheaper than professional people, and actually much more accurate because they know the subject. So we're thinking about that as well. So it's getting the students engaged. It comes back to what I said before. It's getting students engaged with the video, not just watch it, but actually to look at it and listen to it carefully.
Okay. Any more questions for the? We'll have a second chance later. A very quick one before going to the second section. You have been talking about, I think it was Professor Young particularly, about production as one of the main areas to involve, or possibly involve video. Have you had any experience recording practice? I mean, I had a discussion recently with a colleague about the idea of having some professional practice recorded in order to be shown and to discuss. I think that there was some, but your own practice. So from the perspective of the student, not showing that the right practice coming from, for example, a professional lab, but to see how students are dealing with some very specific task in a laboratory or a handmade process, for example.
I'll be able to tell you soon. We've got one of our academics, as we're sitting here, he's bought a GoPro, you know, he's got a camera, all sort of things used for cyclists and kids on the helmets. He's going to attach this to his head to do lab work. Actually, I am not convinced that that will work, actually. Because I think, I said it before, filming in laboratories is quite hard for all sorts of reasons. But I said to him, filming in laboratories is hard for all sorts of reasons. He said, no, I'm going to do it. So anyway, he's going to get a thing on his strapped on his head and he's going to do all that kind of stuff. But actually, there's I think the nice thing about video, I was explaining earlier, is because we're all now producers, we can experiment in a much freer way than we could do before. You know, so even 4 or 5 years ago, if I wanted to experiment with that expensive camera, or I'd have to get a production team, now they can go and buy a GoPro for €90 and a strap to their head, or is it a bit more expensive than that? I don't know. Yeah, okay. Cheap GoPro, and not a pretend GoPro then. Okay, it's 100 and something or other, isn't it? Anyway, so,
cheaper.
Cheaper. Yeah, they will go and get it. Yeah, stick it on their heads, and they do it, and then they can then see it on their own machine, and they then either say, yeah, that's good enough, right? Because they're the subject experts. I'm not the subject expert. They know what they want the students to see, or they'll say, Clive was right, it's rubbish, and therefore they'll go off and do something else. You know what I mean? But I think that's a nice place to be in. We're at that experimental stage. The technologies and the techniques are there for us to play with, as long as we don't spend too much money on experimentation. I encourage our people to do it. There are problems. We'll come back, I think, in the second question about just basic production things that Jack and I would keep us me. But sometimes people have to experiment a little bit and give them the freedom to do that. But again, it comes back to what I'm saying. Is for this particular, he's a chemist, and if he thinks that is good enough for his students, then that might be okay. Even if Jack or I look at that and say, oh, he might think that's fine, and actually he will learn from that and probably improve from that as well.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
You are in the university doing videos. What do you think is the future in terms of budget, organization? Video is very difficult because it's time consuming, it's expensive, and how do you think that it works having a unit? It's gonna grow.
Okay.
What's your guess about where are we going, or what will be?
Where are we going? I wish I knew. I think that's a really, really valid question, because and it wasn't even a question, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, but it is a question now. What we've had is on the back I'll talk about our university, and hopefully we can generalise it from that point. What we had 4 or 5 years ago, I've been at university about 6 years, so I'm trying to think about halfway through. we had a very small number of people doing video, yeah, and they sometimes called in the central support unit to do that, or they developed themselves quite high levels of skills. They bought professional level equipment and they made their own videos, right? And that was fine, okay? Since we've done the lecture capture experiment, it's brought a lot more people into, it's raised the interest in video more generally. To the point is that our central support unit cannot support them. They're now, they're never going to have a big enough budget. So I'm going out, I'm like an evangelist, is that a word? Yeah, evangelist. I'm going to say, use video, right? And then people say, oh, what support? None, no support.
Yeah, we know it.
We know the problem, yeah. So what we're doing, and this is quite recently, we've now started to get our professional people and me and my colleagues to start to speak together a bit more creatively and say, and we're beginning to understand that there's got to be something in between the professional level full production, full studio-based material, and the stuff you do on your webcam. Yeah. Where is the kind of, if you're a golfer, so it's a sweet spot. It's a phrasing, so a sweet spot. Where's the point, the best point along there? Sweet spot. We don't really know, and it'll depend for each individual. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to do a couple of things. We're trying to work out what do academics really want to do. What kind of filming do they want to do? How can we provide online support, just-in-time support, templates, guidelines, checklists, equipment lists, that sort of thing, to help people not to suffer too much at the outset. And then the other side is how do we provide the kind of technical infrastructure? So that I was speaking with Mireille earlier on, and we're talking about using things like apps on your mobile device, so that once you film stuff, you can then put it straight up into the university system. We don't have that, but we know we need to do that type of thing, and do have some very simple editing tools on there as well. So the answer to that will be we'll have to find something in between, where we've got a much better support environment for our academics. We've got a much better, a technical support environment. We've got to provide the resources that they can do it themselves. But we still have a professional team, and we have some more professional advisors who can step in and help them, particularly at the early stages. We haven't got that perfect formula yet, but we do know we have to look for it. And where we're starting is to speak to our academics. Just ask them, what are you people doing? What's your problems? Where would you like us to help? Often they don't want the hands to be held all the time. They just want something to start them on.
Well, I have an experience recently which was, I think, very successful with not very much budget problem, and that was I did a workshop in Kenya to lecturers from polytechnics, so it's for vocational work. And they wanted to put more video into their courses. And so the workshop was concerning doing video, and they produced some videos of various things, like how to put oil in a car, and how to look at the motherboard of a computer and fix it up, and so on. And after that, they intended to go back to their universities using handheld cameras. So there was a cost, but they already had the handheld cameras. So it wasn't mobiles, it was cameras. They had ideas about how to creatively use different ways of lighting things, and they're just going to do it themselves. And there's a forum where they're saying they are doing it. Now, in one particular polytechnic, because they came from all over Africa, they persuaded their university, their polytechnic, to give quite a bit of money to start up a unit like Clive's. But in other places, they just did it themselves.
So I think we have to, one of the interesting aspects has been, I don't know if any of you here are video professionals, but, okay, good, I can say it frankly then. Video professionals often, sorry Jack, you're a video professional, often come from a culture of very, very high production, broadcast quality values, and it's quite difficult for them. And I feel the pain. They look at a video produced on that and they just start crying, you know. What our job is to try to get to help them to think about things from the pedagogical point of view, where sometimes this is okay, and you know, to bring a full camera team to do something, just a quick talking head, is not really worth it, you know. But the other point is that we're not putting them out of job either. Okay, we were speaking to Marta earlier about the investment in video. Was it Marta? We had a few discussions today, somebody this morning. And then what we're saying is that sometimes it is worth putting quite good money into video, and it's the sort of thing that where it's going to be material that you're going to use quite a lot over a number of years. Okay, so you may have some lab technique, you talk about lab techniques, but something that you know the students will find valuable over a number of years. In fact, those videos you showed me about the informatica skills, that type of thing, that sort of stuff, you know the students are going to need that. Spend some time and money and make that really nice. And I think that's fine. And the other part is, sometimes you need high quality video for an external audience. So if you're, I don't know if you do this much here in the walk, but we do quite a bit of external courses for work with external companies. And they're spending quite a lot of money for it. So we feel that we have to have, our video has to be of a slightly different kind of quality. If it's good, we then use it back in our other programs. But so there's and things like marketing as well. Sometimes you want a slightly higher level quality for that. But again, think about what the kind of purpose is of it. So for our professional teams, we're not sort of sacking them. We're not putting them out of job. They're still going to be there, and they're still going to have a very valuable service. But we're just trying to say, well, it's a little bit, what quality, what support do we need for different activities, different video activities.
Okay, as you see, we are completely into the how now. So I think we have more or less, there are several questions in this section. We have been discussing some of them. For example, there was a question about common errors.
Yeah.
And we might have dealt a little bit with this sort of, let's say, doubts or not very effective approaches to creating video. Another idea that we can put together is the length and the timing. You have already considered that, the idea of attention, the attention span of students, but also the need to catch the attention with not only with striking images, but also with a correct timing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to add something about these topics, and then we will go to that. You have this a graph of what we have called the trilemma of how to use pedagogical video in an online environment, which is asynchronous in some way, but is asking interactivity from students. So maybe we can more or less go with all this. If we want to add some experience that you have, what would stand as a common error or common ill-advised approach to video use in class, and the idea of timing, and then how to deal with the idea of asynchronous education, interaction, and video.
I want to ask about this as asynchronous. Is there any reason why you don't have synchronous meetings?
I can give an answer. I think it's a little bit, it has to do with the foundational idea of the UOC, of having access from everywhere at any time. So it would be difficult, for example, if you have people from different parts of the world in the same class, and having a synchronous discussion, because some of them couldn't do that, or it would allow for a complete change of every day in their everyday lives. So we have been quite respectful in this trying to be asynchronous because of that. It is true that sometimes you can guess, for example, if you have if you know your students and you guess that there is not such a problem, you can have the opportunity in some specific occasions, for example, to go for a synchronous activity from time to time. But it's not in the standard model of the work.
No, it just struck me that because we've been talking several times, it's come up, this idea of a flipped classroom, okay, where people watch a video and then there may be questions they have to answer them. But then in a face-to-face university, they would come back into the class and the lecturer would ask them questions, they would ask him questions concerning the video, and then they would have some extension activities. Now, that's something that can be done online if it's synchronous. And surely sometimes you can schedule a time and say, please log on at this particular time and we're going to have a class discussion concerning that video and some extended activities. So I'm trying to add an extra thing to your trilemma.
No, I think we have been trying, being asynchronous, it doesn't mean that we don't have a timing. For example, we use a lot of debate activities, and if a debate activity is to be successful, it is good for the discussion to have a very short time to do that. But if you allow, for example, even if it's only some hours or a whole day, if you want to keep it very short, it will be enough for people from different parts of the world to participate. That will be different. So it's asynchronous, but it is not without an idea of timing. For us, timing is very important, but not a login at a very specific time. It would cause some potential problems. I don't know. Maybe there are some people here that have some different experiences and being very institutional. Right. So, any thoughts about timing, for example? Timing as length of the video, or the using of editing, or this kind of timing resources for.
Well, this has come up a few times. There's been some research on MOOCs recently, but it's very superficial. The research was done on 4 MOOCs, edX MOOCs, on what is the best duration for a segment of video, and the man came up with, the group came up with 6 minutes as being optimal. Okay, but you cannot come up with that conclusion when you're looking at only 4 courses. And there are only 4 subjects. And you know, when I looked into this, I also found some web discussion. There was a mathematician who said, I don't accept bite size. As if there's a theorem that takes 20 minutes to solve, then I'm going to take 20 minutes, not 6 minutes. No. So I'm saying that it depends. You find on average, in the Open University, we had on average about 6 minutes, but some was 15 and some was 3. So it was like that. So I think it depends on what you're trying to teach. And what is a self-contained segment of video which leads to some distinct learning? That could be 3 minutes, it could be 1 minute, and it could be 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll do the about the interactivity perhaps. I'll go back onto the diagonal line. So I was saying earlier that the trick with video is this idea of integration with other resources and with activities. And I was just thinking about, I mean, we do, because we're a face-to-face university, we do have synchronous, because we have tutorials and lectures and stuff like that. But what we're doing, obviously like most places, we're doing a lot more flipping, so it's getting people to think a little bit more about what they do in these live events and how they use video and other materials to flip. Flipping doesn't have to be video related, it's just 2 things go together rather well. So the sort of things that, here's just a few examples. I was just thinking about some of the stuff. One of the most popular ones is what's called hot questions. Hot questions. And what happens is, it's called hot questions because our virtual learning environment is Moodle, which I think you're familiar with, and that has something called hot questions in it. So what we do is the students go, our lecturer makes up a video. This is not a recorded one, this is something it's usually done on his laptop, in which he describes a problem or an issue or something, a piece of literature. And then the students have to pick out questions that they want to discuss based on that. Hot questions in Moodle is a kind of a ranking system. So you type in a question and then you put another question, or you can vote the question up. So you can get, from a video you may have 20 questions, but then other people can vote on them, so you get kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a popularity list of questions. Then, when they go into the lecturer-led event, so it doesn't have to be synchronous, but it could be synchronous, but it's led by the tutor or the lecturer. He, and is a he in this case, then discusses the questions with the students. So that could be in a forum, or live, or he has done a video to follow up on the questions. So they get this kind of interaction with the material from that. So that's one way to do that. Another way is to get the students to re-represent the material in the video, to translate from the video format into another format, which is very good for learning because you're jumping from one form of representation to another. So you could get a video and get them to make a mind map. A mind map, very nice way of doing that quite quick. In fact, I was at a session where one of our academics was getting the students, this was actually a live event, getting students to collaboratively create mind maps as they were watching videos. It was really, really interesting. A lot of very, very deep level debate about what the video really meant from the mind map. So the mind map is quite clear, it's either this or it's that, and the students had to discuss it. But it doesn't have to be mind map, it could be a summary, get students to just write a summary of it, or describe the process, or do a drawing, or something like that. Just use that as a way of engaging with that. There are other things you could then use from the video. This again is for the students. It's like a summary, but you say, well, relate what was in the video to another problem. Jack made a very good point earlier about part of learning is about transferring from one problem to another. So you say, here's a video about this. How would you translate these ideas into another situation? If we're getting into students doing production, you get students to make a reply to the video. Do their own video about the video. So it's circular, but that sort of thing. But all these kind of ideas have come out from our experimentation with flipped lectures. I think they're all valuable things that you could use for any kind of video-related learning design. Ideal length of a video, I agree with you really. It's as long as it needs to be. The problem is obviously people's attention spans are very short, and if any of you in this room have children, you know that their attention spans are getting ever shorter. Therefore, if it's going to be a longer video, it has to be engaging somehow. It doesn't necessarily have to be visually engaging like in fantastic visual effects. It has to be narratively engaging. It has to be a story which they will watch to the end of it. But generally speaking, yeah, it has to be pretty short actually, to be honest. But as Jack says, it depends on what's the kind of conceptual unit. How long does it take to explain this particular thing? It's quite so there's not a fixed answer there either.
You gave me a good idea when you talked about mind maps.
Yeah.
Is it similar to a concept map?
Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, concept map. Yeah.
Concept mapping.
Mind maps are just an electronic version.
I had to review a paper recently where somebody added an audio to a developing concept map.
Yeah.
So they started off with one thing, and you've got the arrows and the next concept and so on. Now, that may be quite a good model for making videos as resources. In other words, it's not PowerPoint, it's audio related to a developing concept map.
Yeah. It's a powerful thought actually, because I think some of the videos, we've videoed a lot of mathematicians, and if you ever watch videos of mathematicians doing stuff on the board, if you're not a mathematician, But for mathematicians, it's really important for them because mathematics is not simply an abstract notation, if you like. It's actually a form of performance. It's an academic performance. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to capture the academics performing their mathematics. So they'll see that, they'll explain that. Like for them, a blackboard, they prefer the blackboards obviously. A blackboard, a piece of chalk. Those two people, rather he shouldn't it? Piece of chalk. And they're off doing that. That's their performance. But it's not just simply a performance as an art, it's also a way of modelling, a way of thinking about a subject. And I think that's something there's a narrative value in video for doing that, for following a train of academic thought. The mind map one is actually an excellent idea, because it visualises that as you go through how they're thinking about a particular issue. So, I mean, also from video, from that point of view, sometimes video may look boring from an audio-visual point of view, but from a subject point of view, if it's telling an academic narrative, that can be very, very powerful, and it can be longer than 6 minutes if it's well done.
Of course, the Khan Academy videos are like that, aren't they?
They're
Well, although
like that.
you don't see the person, you only see them working on the tablet. I'm not sure if it's just handwritten or whether it's handwritten on top
Some are
of
handwritten,
prepared.
yeah. Some are. It's a very thing, yeah. The Khan Academy stuff in the mathematics is all available with that.
I think I certainly have seen handwritten, but on existing PowerPoint slides. So not everything is handwritten, and it's just annotating an existing slide.
I went to speak to some students in chemistry and asked them, do you use Khan Academy for your studies? And they said, of course. How could I be so crazy that they would not use these materials? So, and I think we have to understand that the students are using these resources. Whether we get involved in this game or not, they're there and they're using it. And actually, to be honest, some of our academics realise that they are being judged against some of these online resources. If the students are using online stuff which is really nice, and we're producing stuff which is a bit not so nice, then they will judge that. So we're not completely isolated here. We have to respond to what's going on outside.
In order to have some time for questions, there are a lot of different things that we have already stated that were in the form of questions. If I had to choose one, as I have this privilege, I would like to ask you about an experience with collaboration. There is a question I think is very important for us because at the UOC we try to engage in students collaborating in different kind of activities. So do you have any experience or any thoughts about how, the question is how should collaborative groups manage to produce videos? For example, going back to the idea of production, not only working with the existing videos, but with making videos in collaboration. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, face to face, I've had a lot of experience in this because we did 10 courses in the BBC for overseas producers, but they were in person, trying to collaborate online to produce a video. That would be extremely difficult, I think. I mean, the designing you can collaborate, but the actual production, how would you collaborate since different people have different editing equipment, different software. I think it would be extremely difficult. I don't know how it would be done.
It's quite difficult. We have we've had a couple of examples, some from science, and a particularly interesting one from history, where we were trying to, my colleagues were working with historians to try and get the idea of how history is made. The problem is that students come to university, history students, with the idea that history just is. it's what you learn to get an exam, right? And the academics were wanting the students to get the idea is that history is made. It's made through a process of selection and dialogue and so on and so on, you know. So the way they wanted to do that was to get the students to create videos representing some historical thing they could choose it themselves. So we were in London, so sometimes they were London-based historical things, context. So how did they do that? They got into groups and they went through the process of creating the videos. So there's a group work element of it, and that's tricky because in any group, student group, there's some people who are more active and some less so. They had to go through that process in order to clarify what the message was, to do some of the, they would then go off and do the research, if you like, and come back into the group, then try to clarify what they wanted to do. And then they had to storyboard it, so they had to get another stage of conceptualization. So in fact, what they were doing by storyboarding was creating this historical narrative. And then they had to produce it, which, as Jack says, is somebody actually has to sit in front of the computer. And what actually happened was, in the groups, one person was usually in charge of the production, and usually another person in charge of the kind of organisation. That's how it works in any group. So it wasn't collaborative in the sense that everybody, maybe they did, I don't really know, but from just speaking to the students, what happened is somebody took the more technical person usually did the kind of actual stuff. But hopefully, for the group to work, is the rest of the process was completely group orientated. The design, if you like, the visual design, the narrative, the storyboarding, the stages, the filming. Usually copied, if it was live film. Sometimes it was done by screenshots, sometimes it was like historians, so they did reenactments, so they had like cloaks on and hats and top. So everyone could get involved in that, which was quite nice. So I thought it was a case of group worked quite well, and I think the pedagogical the pedagogical aim there was the idea that history was created, and even if you ended up with a video, it was still something that had a creative process behind it. So they were trying to get the idea that a history book is a creative, it's the end of a creative process. It's not the facts. This is what we're trying to get. So that was quite good. And I think actually that's probably there. Then you get another problem though. Another problem about this is how do you actually mark that? How do you give a student a mark for group work? And this is an old problem in education because some people work more than others and so on. And there's different ways of approaching that as well. So there's no reason why not. I mean, it's not any really different from you've all done this, like group presentations. You get the students to present with PowerPoints. It's the same sort of thing, really, just with it's a bit more high tech.
We have still 10 minutes for questions.
I have a question, sir. I'm a bit concerned about what I've read and heard, that you use collaborative learning to such an extent that maybe don't concentrate on the individual learning. Let me give you an example of what I mean. In the Open University, when we produced a course, someone went away, an individual went away and did an outline. Then there was a big discussion, maybe half a day. Another individual went away for 1 week, much deeper, detailed thinking, individual work, and then we had another meeting, another half day. And then a third individual went away, again another week, maybe even 2 weeks to produce. The detailed, deep work was done by the individual, not by the group. The group was a catalyst for somebody to do very creative work as an individual. So, and where is learning? It's in the individual's mind. So I'm just wondering, to what extent, am I wrong that you don't emphasize individuals enough?
Right. Maybe we will have different experiences, and as for mine, particularly, I would completely agree in what you were saying about the idea of think in the right way to approach any different educational video in what you are trying to communicate. In my experience, I would say that I'm quite focused on individual learning, but I'm looking for the right time because I'm very as a researcher, I'm very into collaborative filmmaking, as we were talking yesterday. But for me, I need to find the right time and the right way to go collaborative. And for some things, and for example, we were talking about this conceptualizing or designing a video or the prototype of a video, and it's very interesting to have people collaborating in doing the same thing or doing different things and talking about it. But for more or less for more conceptual theoretical work, I will go probably for an individual, active, but at the same time in individual way of learning. So I think we try to look for the right way to do that. It is that we don't discard a collaboration in some places because it is important for us to work also in this collaborative side because we think it's a skill they need for their professional career too. So we include collaboration as one of the skills in our degrees, but we are not working collaboratively all the time at all. This is my experience, sorry. I don't know if there are some colleagues here that may share or not your experience about that, but I think we're quite individual. Yeah.
One of the ways, you'll know this, but one of the ways in terms of students' assessment to get over that problem is even if they've done group work, they do an individual account, an individual report of that. So as Jack says, it's still the individual learning, but they reflect in that report on their contribution of the group and the group activities. So it's still, I have a lot of sympathy with that actually. I think we can sometimes, I think collaborative learning is very useful and something we have to learn to do, the students have to learn to do, but it's not the only thing that students do. I tell you what's very good collaboratively is collaborative course design. We've been working with some techniques to try to get people to think creatively about courses and how they develop them. And I mentioned earlier the kind of 6 learning types. We have a workshop that we do where we take people, we give people little cards with these learning types on them and get them to design their module based on these little learning types, right? And sequence them as a storyboard, if you like. And then on we turn over little cards and there's little examples of what you could actually do with these cards. So some of them are video and some of them are not. Different types of learning activities on that. And that's really great fun actually. We just started doing it this year. And what's really interesting is how creative that academic colleagues, teachers can be if you give them the right framework to work in. And they come out with ideas I could never have thought of, including video, by the way. They'll go away and say, oh, we can go in. Sometimes they need a little bit of a slight push, but once they get going, they're away. And I think in terms of design, interestingly, course design is often an individual activity, actually. But if you can get to the point where groups can collaborate, it's incredibly rich. And actually it's a lot more interesting, a lot more fun as well. We're organising an event sometime next month where we get a whole programme which is made up of a number of modules, 6 modules. We get them all together in one room designing this kind of stuff. So they have learning technologists on hand to ask them if they want some stimulus about different ways of doing stuff. But so I would really recommend that as a way of thinking about media and blended learning and rich learning and all that sort of thing. Try and get your colleagues to go in for collaborative course design. If you need any help, we have some techniques we'd love to play with and experiment with you. But yeah, I think that's really good. And I honestly believe, in terms of media, it's a sort of a catalyst for educational innovation. It's not necessarily an end in itself, but it's a catalyst. It gets people thinking different ways of representing the subject, different ways of working with students, different relationship between the students and the material and the resources. And I think that's really great fun. I think it's a good time. It's a good time to be in this room. It's a good time to be developing and have an interest in this area, because I think it's only going to go like that in the future.
Any more questions? Your last chance, I think. I'd like to suggest, I was thinking about how to overcome, because the idea of collaborating, creating video in online environments. And because I need to think about that for our courses. And there are 4 ways that came up. One of them might be, for example, but the main problem is going with your cameras in the street and coordinating something, because it is complicated. You need a lot of people, and if you are working online, this can be very difficult. One way to overcome this could be using pre-existing material as an archive or remixing pre-existing material, which is easier because fortunately we have a lot of Creative Commons or public domain materials to work with, and this is a creative way of working and acquiring skills and collaborating without the need of using actual equipment. The other one is using some sort of computer-generated image, like an animation or like any sort of visualization. But if you really need to produce with your camera, you can also work with a division of tasks. This is more or less what the professor was saying about identifying the one who has the skills maybe to produce what is already being discussed and free of the collaboration. Or producing, this is something we have experienced sometimes, working in different segments, so each individual can produce a very small part already fruit of a collaboration in order to be joined together in a sort of a longer piece. This is just a sort of suggestion that might be of use, and we have been experimenting with some of this.
It depends on the group. I think a nice aspect of group work is if the students actually do recognise that people have different skills and strengths in a group. And if some more technical, that's fine. It worries me a little bit though. On the history project, I think there was some students, and I'm not going to characterise it, but no, I won't characterise it. But some students took a bit of a stand back because these are art students. Remember, they felt technology is not for me, you know, and they let the kind of more geeky kind of students to do the work for them. They were hitchhiking. I'm not saying they didn't contribute. I'm not saying they didn't, you know, put a lot into the project, but I think it's just a slight risk. You've got to be careful in putting either groups together or thinking about or suggesting how groups work, not to summon people to step out of the technologies, because that's part of their learning as well. They should also be able to at least be comfortable, not necessarily that it's all at the same level, but be comfortable with the process. So, but that's a trick of group work though. It's not necessarily the media, it's just how groups work together.
So how would you assess the contributions to group work by the different people if they're all doing different things?
Yeah, well, so I think that would probably, yeah, it's good. It's not really. It's about. I think. I mean, most of the ones I've seen have had this individual contribution, a reflective piece on that, and that's how they do it. So you say, well, I was a techie person on this, but I brought in the ideas from that, and that helped me to sort of structure. Or if I was an ideas person, and that was represented by the technical person who then sort of represent online, and so that you give them the mark for their what you can assess. I mean, in most groups, by the way, by the person who's market is pretty familiar with the group work and how they work anyway. So it's not you're not relying completely on the account of the student, but it does. But part of the learning is how they react, how they work in a group. We say group work is good. How people work in groups is important. How your own particular individual relationship with the group, how you participate is important. But then they also get a mark for the contribution for the whole thing at the end, because they should have produced something. That's also important.
Do they all get the same mark for that one piece of work?
They do, yes. I think that's usually the case. Unless somebody's been a complete, you know, non-attender.
Talking about assessment and formative assessment, is that a 7th thing that you should have on your 6?
What was that?
Yeah. Oh, is it in there somewhere? You had 6 things.
Yes.
Formative assessment.
Yes. Yes. Just a small thing on that, Jack Smith reminded me. about assessment and formative. You know the terms formative and summative assessment. Summative has a mark, formative doesn't. If you're going to get students to produce stuff, video, right, you should have some formative work beforehand so they get a chance to try it out. I mean, I've been saying experimentation is really important in video. And it sometimes worries me, a particular history one, for example, all the marks were on this last video that they're going to produce. I would have liked to see some formative work. The students produce something much smaller. I mean, it doesn't have to be a video, it could be a storyboard or something like that, so they've got some feedback on the process. It's not just the final piece of work. And I think that's formative and summative is very important, that the students, even if they write an exam, for example, a written exam, they've got to be able to practice that in a formative environment and get feedback. If they're producing a video, they've got to be able to give some feedback in that earlier. Just some thought.
And I think that we have in an online environment, we have a great opportunity to keep track of the process.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can keep track also of collaboration and these smaller formative activities.
Online you can use collaborative tools to do that, collaborative storyboard tools and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I think time's up.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank you very much, Professor Koumi, Professor Young, and the Lions for organizing this.